Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. Today is going to be one of those exciting videos when I'm going to swatch my new watercolor palette that I put together. So it's a customized and themed color palette. So this is my Colourful Landscape palette, which I put together a while ago, and I have already done a reveal in my online course when I created the cozy watercolor mushrooms. And so it's a palette that is great for colorful landscapes, as well as anything that's related to the woodland and botanical and all that kind of thing. And I'm not going to reveal too many images from the online course just to not give away too much, but basically it gives you an idea of the color palette that we're working with. So loads of bright colors, loads of vivid colors, as well as some more deeper and dramatic colors. There's also loads of colors that are pigment separating and granulating. So it's a really fun watercolor palette, and probably my funnest that I have so far put together. This layout here is from a recent tutorial I've done, which I believe is the previous Friday, most likely. So if you're curious to watch it, then go ahead and check it out later. So these are mushrooms, and they are kind of the unusual fungi, so not your traditional type of a mushroom that has a cap and a stem. And these are different, and I try to play with the shapes and things. So let's dive into swatching out all these colors. I'm very excited to do the reveal here on YouTube. As I promised before, I wanted to do the reveal first for my students in the Cozy Watercolor Mushroom course, and now that it's been up for a few weeks, I'm also going to reveal it here. So originally this was my Daniel Smith colors, or watercolors rather, palette, and I ordered this tin from Jackson's years and years ago, and then I had colors only sitting on these two rows. I managed to squeeze in an extra half pan in each of the rows. Also, I then turned the pans across and also stuck them inside here. So you can see they're a bit wobbly and they're a bit raised, but I just wanted to get the maximum number of colors that I could get in. I have been painting now with this watercolor palette for a good few weeks, maybe up to a month now, and it's been really a joy. Love all the colors. I didn't come across that many colors that I didn't use. You'll see there's loads of greens in here, and it's not a traditional color palette in the sense that it doesn't have like purples or yellows, although I did include a yellow thereafter, but generally it's just a completely different layout. I'm starting with greens, going into kind of turquoisey colors, and then yellows and more turquoises around here, then some muted colors and darker colors, and over here we have these sort of oranges and yellow ochres going into reds and pinks. So beautiful in my opinion, and it's very versatile, and loads of colors that are included in this palette are convenience colors that I can just use as they are, but also I do enjoy mixing with them as well. But I put together a really easy to use palette that I don't need to think about mixing if I don't want to. There is a total of 37 colors. As I mentioned before, I squeezed one in and it's now 13 at the top, and comfortably you would fit in 12, but you can totally squeeze in an extra. So we've got 13 at the top, 13 at the bottom, and 11 half pence in the center. So I think 37 colors are a very good number, and we'll start with the chartreuse. And this chartreuse is from my own watercolors. I have a handmade watercolor brand, which I'm very proud of. It's a thing to have your own watercolors, and especially colors that you love using a lot. and have them ready in the tube. So that's a lot of satisfaction right there. So I have a watercolor set which is called the Ultimate Watercolor Set. Let me just grab it for you. In the Ultimate palette you get 5 of my favorite color mixes, and you've got the Chartreuse, Quinacridone Gold, Strawberry Velvet, Green Gold Deep and Cobalt Teal. These two and these two you will find traditionally in most brands and in most color palettes. However, the Chartreuse is being one of the more contemporary colors that has been added more recently. And I'm not talking about the spring green type of a color, which is more like an acidic green. A more true Chartreuse color is a color that has been kind of trendy more in the recent years. And then the Strawberry Velvet is a very unique mix, and I have designed all the mixes and all the colors myself. So these are handmade and they are vegan watercolors, and they're available currently on sale on alyonacreates.com, which is my website. So have a look if you are interested. So as I said, this color is called Chartreuse. Next one, we're going to go into Mission Gold, and it's Leaf Green, which is a more milkier color, and it is also more yellow. So this is a beautifully transparent, zesty Chartreuse, and this one is more kind of like a creamier and milkier version with more yellow in there. Next one is a classic and one of my favorite Daniel Smith colors. As you probably noticed, I have started using my Daniel Smith colors more often now, and going back to all the colors that I used to really love, and they have possibly been the building bricks in creating my own sense of color. And then we have Daniel Smith Sap Green. Loads of sap greens I tried. I do like the Daniel Smith one. Many artists refer to it as a classic sap green. Okay, then we have Daniel Smith again, and we have olive green. So this is a lovely, muted, gorgeous green that I discovered myself and really enjoyed. And then we have Michael Harding Green Moss. So this one is also quite interesting, similar to the olive green, but even more complex. So there's sometimes you get a bit of pigment separation, and it's got a lovely kind of glow, almost like a nickel azo yellow come through. So it's a very juicy color. Even though it's muted, it's not a flat color. Next one, we've got Serpentine, also from Daniel Smith. This one is a bit like Marmite, sorry. Because you either hate it or you love it. I had some years where I really didn't enjoy it, and now I kind of started enjoying it again. Green Appetite, I think, is like a cousin of Serpentines because they're very similar in quality. They have this pigment separating quality to them, and one is just more on a kind of brighter green and the other one is more muted. Next one is Daniel Smith Rich Green Gold. So if I want kind of like a mustard, muted type of mustard, then that's my color. Next one is Viridian. So Viridian is very light. You can't really build it up too much. It has a great level of transparency and there's only so much you can do with it. But it's a beautiful color in mixes and on its own as well. It's got that lovely turquoise look to it. And then we have my Cobalt Teal, which is greener than other Cobalt Teals. And it also has the benefit of pigment separation. And you get these lovely speckles of blue in there. And because the base color is slightly tipping more towards green, you then get the blue come through more. So I'm quite happy with how this color came out. It's exactly how I had it in my mind. Very kind of unique. Ultramarine turquoise, again going back to Daniel Smith. Beautiful color. If you love your turquoises, if you love painting the ocean, this is a great color. Or if you like that traditional, I shouldn't say traditional, it's more of a modern color palette where you have a beautiful brown orange, this color next to it. I mean, you can see it just looks gorgeous. I don't think I actually used this particular one in here, but you can see the colors are leaning towards that turquoise, and then they pop greatly next to yellows and oranges. Okay, last color in the top row is Cascade Green. So that's a gorgeous, gorgeous color. So also pigment separating. It does some magnificent watercolor magic. So a beautiful color. Again, it's got turquoises in there, slightly more muted, but it's got so much character. Let's move on to the middle row. So the only yellow that I have. And firstly, I didn't have this color actually in the palette when I first put it together. I had to do a few adjustments as I was working with it. So I did decide to put Nickel Laser Yellow just because if I want to lift any of those greens that I have, if I want to lift, in fact, any color that I have, Nickel Laser Yellow is a great pushy color. It does all these, if you just drop into other colors, it kind of will just push the other colors away and create a beautiful blossoming kind of edges and all those gorgeous watercolor effects. But also if you mix it with the watercolors, it just gives you that lovely glow from underneath, like when I was mentioning this color. And in fact, a lot of these colors as well, glowy colors. Right, another color which is kind of very close sitting to these two. Nonetheless, it's different and I did want to include it. I bought it a while ago and it hasn't been in any palette, and just sort of randomly I would push it across my desk, and you know, once something is sitting in the palette, you're more likely to use it. And this is the A Gallo Fig Green. It's not great in mixes usually. It kind of makes things a little bit dull and a bit, how should I say, opaque. Not in a good way, I found, but I do love it on its own. It's it has that creamy and more yellow and slightly more muted than the Magello. So if you compare them to side by side. Moving on to Daniel Smith Amazonite. Now this is another fantastic turquoise color. You can see I've got all the turquoises here in abundance, and I just went to town with it because this palette should represent me as an artist, the colors that I love using in a specific way, right? Because often if you think, what do I paint? If I paint abstract art, would I use these colors? Perhaps I would add some other colors to it and not need that many, but for the colorful landscapes and mushrooms and all that sort of a thing, all of these colors are being used and enjoyed. Okay, Daniel Smith Prussian Green, another stunning must-have color. It's so deep. It's got that turquoise come through. It's gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. Next one, Daniel Smith Jadeite. That color I actually forgot about. I was recommended this color by one of my viewers years ago, and it was beautiful. But again, you know, sometimes colors and tubes of paints just get lost in your little boxes and whatever where you're keeping them, so you end up not using them. So going through all of my colors and putting this palette together reunited me with some of the colors that are really, really lovely. Next one, we've got actually a Schminke. This is the first Schminke and possibly the last. Perylene Green. So when I want a deep green that is almost like black but super contrast impact, then I will go for this color. I'm just thinking I should maybe just lift a little bit on the side. It's almost like a grayish green, but if you take Payne's Grey and add it to this color, I think it would be like Daniel Smith's Prussian Green with Payne's Grey. Kind of reminds me of that. It's got that deep green but beautiful color. Not turquoisey, but beautiful. Back to Daniel Smith. Buff Titanium. Buff Titanium, actually, I added to create milkier versions of other colors instead of a white. Honestly, haven't used it so far, and I'm definitely not using it as it is because it just doesn't work with the color palette. So that may be one color that is not getting much use, and I might consider replacing this color if it carries on. Just because I want to have every single color in there that I do use often. This is another classic and loved by so many artists. This is Moonglow. Where there is Moonglow, it has to have its cousin, and it's Shadow Violet. So Shadow Violet, in comparison to Moonglow, is more, I was going to say beige, but it's not really beige. So this one has more purple in there. This one has less. And they both are pigment separating. They both are quite unique in the sense that they have some blues and sometimes some pinks come through. So it's really, really beautiful and perfect colors for mushrooms. Absolutely perfect. So next one, Daniel Smith Payne's Grey. I cannot have a palette without Payne's Grey. Whatever palette it would be, when it's a watercolor, it has to have Payne's Grey. And I also use this color often with my pencils, colored pencils, and acrylic paints as well. Love the color. It's just a bluey grey. Last color in the top, or in the middle rather, in the middle row, is Mayan Blue. That's the only blue that I have here. All the other colors are turquoises leaning towards green. So this is a great denim type of color, and you can see how interesting this color palette is so far, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, you have so many greens and so many turquoises. Where are the other colors? Well, the other colors are coming in the bottom row, and at this point I'm going to go and swap the water, and we're going to start with clean water. Later, when I show you close-ups, I will also point out which out of these colors are the pigment separating colors. Okay, so we'll start with this orangey color, and this is of course Aussie Red Gold, and it's another color that is really loved by artists because it's got such a lovely luminosity to it, lovely glow, but it's not your typical kind of artificial orange. It's such a good orange. So Daniel Smith, again, Daniel Smith Quinacridone Sienna. This is a color that I just want to actually use up. It's a color that's beautiful, but I haven't really been using it that much. It's like a more orange quinacridone gold, basically. And it is lovely. In fact, that's the color I used here without mixing. Next one we have Daniel Smith Quinacridone Deep Gold. So here I went for a deep gold rather than the gold. I think I had the gold initially and then I swapped it for the deep gold, thinking that if I want to lift it more, then I just can add a bit of Nicolaise yellow and lift it. But otherwise, I like these more saturated, beautiful golden colors. Okay. Next color we have Daniel Smith Transparent Red Oxide, another favorite of mine. I love, love, love this color. Straight out of pan as it comes, as well as mixing with it. It's super granulating. It will create loads of drama in your paintings, and it's just a very beautiful color. Next one we have, actually is this Schminke? Yeah, this is my second Schminke color, and this is the yellow ochre. And when it comes to ochres, I really like Schminke's ochre because it's super creamy. It's a little bit on the opaque side, but it's creamy and it's delicious and it's just gorgeous. Some ochres can be a little bit washed out and a little bit on a boring side, dare I say, but this one is gorgeous. Haven't used it much, so that's another color along with buff titanium that I haven't used. Like in this arrangement, it would be just not, you know, not bright enough, but I'll see. I included it for also mixing purposes as well. Next one, Daniel Smith Goified. So this is another pigment separating color. Sorry if you couldn't see that. Let me just move things a little bit. So Goified separates beautifully. It's like a dirtier version of the yellow ochre. Okay, next color. I'm actually going to leave a little gap because it's shimmery, so I don't want to contaminate the other colors and in the swatches, so I'm going to come back to it. And the color after it is Magello's June Brilliant number 2. And that is like a peachy pink, super opaque, but it's gorgeous. And it's nice to create a different type of contrast. So if I use some of that color in all those bright colors, it would actually be popping out quite a bit. And yeah, it's a great color to have. There is one that's, I think, even peachier than that. This is the pinker version, so the number 1 I think is peachier, but I included that color. Okay, the rest are all reds and pinks, and they're my favorite reds and pinks, so I'm quite happy to have them here. We have Daniel Smith Paraline Scarlet, and then we have next to it Daniel Smith Deep Scarlet. Again, when red comes to mind, those two colors I have to have side by side, because one is kind of this bright fire engine red and the other one is slightly more muted, like a more elegant and more, you know, classy version of this color, I'd say, although they're both very beautiful, but it's like mother and daughter. Next one we have is Winsor & Newton Permanent Rose. So if you don't like your opera pink, if that's just too much for you to handle, then the color I would recommend is this one. It's super vivid, super bright. I'm going to try lift a little bit on the corner. It's just gorgeous, and it's more of a sophisticated version of the opera pink. So opera pink would be Camden Town and this one would be Kensington. Does that make sense? So that's your opera pink. Always hard to show up on camera because of its neon brightness and glow. And the final pink is more muted. It's very, very nice pink. If you like pink but you don't want them to be screaming, in fact right next to opera pink it almost looks dull, but it's gorgeous. It's a muted pink, which is actually quite hard to find, and it's Rhodonite by Daniel Smith. Opera pink is also Daniel Smith, and Rhodonite is a granulating and slightly pigment separating as well. There's a little bit of beige coming through here. Very nice color, very unique, and love that. So let's come back to the final color, and that is my Iridescent Scarab Red, and it's also by Daniel Smith. And it just takes a few seconds to wake this color up because it's actually the most beautiful when it's in its like full opacity. It's not too opaque, but it's just got that shimmer, which I'll show you. It's like a chocolate background with a lovely green turquoisey shimmer on it, and it needs to dry to show you exactly what it looks like. So let me wait for these to dry and I will show you lovely close-ups as well. So these are now dry and also titled, So pause if you need to take a note of these colors, and I will tell you which ones are pigment separating. So we have got in the first row, it's moss green, which is actually not very visible here. It is temperamental, so in some papers, in certain watercolor techniques, you can get some pigment separation, but it doesn't show up here very well. Then we have serpentine. Now serpentine has beautiful kind of beige particles in there. For some reason on the camera it's showing up as more green than it actually is. Then we have green apatite, and you can see here very well the pigment separation. There's some bright greens and some also muted particles as well. Generally you get a bit more of those muted particles settling in the serpentine as well, but not today. Then the next one would be my cobalt teal, and hopefully you can see some lovely blue area here and some green as well, so don't know how much is showing up. Then we have ultramarine turquoise. That's also another great color that also separates into blues and greens. Cascade green, you can see beautiful blues, and again some more kind of almost olive green muddier colors that come through. Next row we would have amazonite. Generally is quite granulating. Can't really see that much pigment separation here, and I think that it does do a little bit of pigment separation out of the top of my mind, just because I haven't used it for a while, so I can't quite remember 100%, but I thought that amazonite may do a bit, or maybe I'm confusing it with the other color here, jadeite. So jadeite definitely does pigment separate, again into these sort of grayer muted particles areas. Moonglow, of course, you can see the beautiful blues and pinks, and the pinks that are more peachier are more obvious in the shadow violet. And then nothing else pigment separating in that row. Final row, goiphite, very, very granulating and also pigment separating, so we've got some darker areas as well. Now iridescent scarab red I can now show you as it has dried, and hopefully you can see that turquoisey green sheen to it, which is really beautiful. And you can layer with it over other colors. In fact, I have shown a technique in the Cozy Watercolor Mushrooms course, how to create a wet look of the mushroom cap using this color. And the final pigment separating color is rhodonite, and that's what's giving it that kind of more muted look, and it's got some lovely kind of warm toned beige grays particles separating in here. So that is my palette, my colorful watercolor palette. I hope you enjoyed looking into it, and kind of maybe you even got inspired by some of the colors. They're, in my opinion, super delicious, and when I see these colors I just want to start creating. It's super inspiring to me. They're very, very inviting, and they are kind of like a happy vibe type of colors. They are balanced, they work together very well, and they're just colors that are like a sunshine on the paper. So I love them for that reason, and as you can see, these type of illustrations work really well with this color palette. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed looking into my colorful landscape palette, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.